Hello friends, welcome to Sci-Fi Traveler. In this adventure, we'll be listening to the story of Nova and Theodore. Refresh your coffees and buckle up. Enjoy the show. The choosing always smelled of nervous men and overpriced cologne, and Theodore had decided long ago that this was the truest thing about it. He stood near a pillar of black glass, watching the obsidian dome curve overhead like the inside of an enormous patient eye, and tried to remember why he'd come. The answer was simple and stupid. Everyone came. The colony of Halcyon floated 4 kilometers above a world that wasn't theirs, and once a year the Sky Temple opened its doors so that lonely people could be lonely together in formal wear. He adjusted his collar, which was strangling him with the quiet enthusiasm of a thing designed by someone who hated necks. Across the candlelit hall, the eligible women had been arranged in glittering rows, and the men were descending on them with all the grace of cargo haulers losing altitude. Theodore watched a fellow named Lucas attempt a bow, misjudge the gravity plating, and nearly headbutt a chandelier. Somewhere a string quartet of automated instruments played something meant to be romantic, though one violin had developed a wheeze and now sounded faintly asthmatic. Theodore found he liked the violin best. It too seemed to be questioning its choices. He had no intention of choosing anyone. He fixed atmospheric regulators for a living, spent his evenings talking to machines that didn't talk back, and had reached the age where being looked at felt like a small public emergency. He would stand here, drink the temple's terrible synthetic wine, and leave before anyone noticed he'd never left the pillar. That was the plan, anyway, until his gaze drifted to the edge of the chamber and simply refused to come back. She stood alone where the candlelight thinned, in the gray margin between brightness and the dark beyond the dome. The crowd had left a careful radius around her, the way water leaves a stone. He'd heard the rumors everyone had. Crimson skin, they said, red as a warning beacon, eyes that held secrets older than the stars. Her kind were unknowable, untouchable. Dangerous in some way no one could quite specify but everyone agreed on, which was, in Theodore's experience, exactly how the most useless rumors sounded. A man beside him leaned in, breath sour with courage wine. "Don't," he advised. "That's the alien. They say if you touch one your hand falls clean off." "Both hands?" Theodore asked. "Or do you get to pick?" The man blinked, retreated, and went to inform someone more receptive. Theodore looked at her again. From here the famous crimson was nothing of the sort, a trick of distance and frightened storytelling. Her skin caught the light like anyone's. The only true difference, even from across the hall, was the shape of her ears. Long, elegantly pointed, swept back like the prow of some small fast ship. She wasn't watching the festivities. She was watching the others not watch her, with an expression he recognized intimately, because he wore it himself most days. The look of someone perfectly comfortable being alone and entirely tired of having to prove it. Their eyes met. It was not, he would think later, a thunderclap. Nothing in the dome trembled. The asthmatic violin kept wheezing. But something passed between them across all that candlelit air. Something old and quiet that went straight through his ribs and rearranged the furniture inside without asking permission. She raised one eyebrow very slightly as if to say, "Go on then." Everyone else found a reason not to. So Theodore stepped away from his pillar. The murmuring started before he'd taken 3 strides. A draft of whispers following him across the marble. He heard his own name, heard the word mad, heard someone wager 3 credits he'd turn back. He hoped they'd bet more. He could have used the money. Each step felt like walking into deeper water, the warnings lapping at his back, the warmth of the crowd falling away behind him. By the time he reached the quiet margin where she stood, the noise of the hall had become a distant tide, and it was only the 2 of them in the dark beyond the glass. Up close she was simply a woman, which was somehow the most astonishing thing about her. "You're either very brave," she said, her voice lower and drier than he'd expected, "or you can't hear the screaming behind you." "I can hear it." Theodore offered his entirely still attached hand. "I'm told I'm about to lose this." Seemed worth the risk to find out which rumor was true. For one suspended moment, Nova looked at his hand as though it were a question no one had ever bothered to ask her properly. Then, slowly, she took it, and somewhere behind them a man lost 3 credits. Her hand was warm, which disappointed approximately everyone watching. Theodore felt the collective deflation of a crowd that had come prepared for amputation and gotten a handshake instead. "Still attached," he reported, examining his fingers with mock concern. "Though I suppose it could be a slow process. Should I expect it by morning, or is this more of a long-term arrangement?" "That depends entirely on whether you keep talking," Nova said. But the corner of her mouth had betrayed her, lifting against what was clearly a lifelong policy of not smiling at strangers. She let go of his hand. Behind them the choosing resumed its glittering nonsense. Theodore could hear Lucas attempting poetry at some poor woman, each line landing with the wet thud of a dropped fish. He decided the margin of the room was the only civilized place in it. "They told me your skin was crimson," he said, "red as a docking beacon. I was promised something alarming. Nova glanced down at her own arm as though checking. The Velari, my great-grandmother's people. Their skin actually did shift color. It ran warm when they were calm, and went deep red when they were frightened or in love, which made them terrible at hiding anything. She lifted one shoulder. I got the ears and a quarter of the temperament. The skin stayed boringly ordinary. People prefer the story, though. It's hard to be afraid of someone who burns easily and can't find shoes that fit. Theodore laughed. A real one, surprising himself, the sound carrying further than he intended. A few heads turned. He didn't care. So the whole unknowable, untouchable, dangerous business is what happens when people meet someone different and decide it's safer to make her a legend than a neighbor. She said it lightly, but he caught the old weariness underneath, the kind that doesn't echo because it's been worn smooth. Easier than learning my name, which is Nova. Theodore. He gestured vaguely at the dome, the candles, the entire absurd enterprise. I fixed the machines that keep this place from falling out of the sky. Atmospheric regulators, mostly. Romantic work. I imagine the falling out of the sky part keeps it interesting. You'd think. Mostly it's me arguing with a coolant valve that's convinced it knows better than I do. He leaned against a column of black glass, more comfortable than he'd been all evening. Last week it tried to vent the whole eastern ring into the upper atmosphere because a sensor sneezed. I talked it down. We have an understanding now. I respect its feelings and it doesn't murder 8,000 people. Nova was watching him with open curiosity now, the guardedness thinning at the edges. You talk to them, the machines. They're better listeners than most of the men in this room. He nodded toward Lucas, who had moved on to interpretive gestures. Lower bar than you'd hope. She looked, and this time she did smile, fully, unguardedly, and Theodore felt the floor of the sky temple tilt in a way that had nothing to do with the gravity plating. It transformed her entirely. The legend cracked and a person stepped through. You're not what I expected either, she admitted. I came tonight because attendance is technically required of all registered residents. I planned to stand here, be quietly terrifying, and leave the moment the doors opened. I did not plan to be assessed by a man who negotiates with valves. In my defense, you started it. You raised an eyebrow at me from across a crowded room. That's basically a written invitation where I come from. Where I come from, it means I dare you. Same thing then. He held her gaze. I'm easily dared. It's a documented weakness. Above them the obsidian dome shivered faintly, and a slow ripple of starlight bled through as its panels phased to translucence. The temple's nightly ritual, the moment when the ceiling forgot to be a ceiling and let the galaxy spill in. The candle flames dimmed in deference. Across the whole hall, conversations faltered as people tilted their faces up toward the wheeling dark, the colony's borrowed planet glowing copper far below. Nova didn't look up. She kept looking at him, and Theodore understood, with a small private vertigo, that he was being weighed against the entire cosmos and somehow not losing. There's something you should know about me, she said quietly, the humor folding away. Before you decide whatever it is you're so clearly deciding. That sounds ominous. It is, a little. She glanced at last toward the spilling stars, then back. And it isn't the kind of thing you say in a room full of people waiting to see your hand fall off. Then let's not say it in one, Theodore said. He surprised himself with how easily it came out. He nodded toward a narrow archway behind her, half-curtained, where the candlelight gave up entirely, and the temple's outer gallery opened onto the night. There's a balcony past there. Or there was. Last time I had to crawl through this place rewiring the heat exchangers, unless they've moved it. Architecture up here has opinions. Nova studied him a moment longer, as if checking the offer for hidden seams, and finding none inclined her head. They slipped out of the hall together, two people leaving a party in opposite emotional directions from everyone else in it, the asthmatic violin wheezing them a private farewell. The gallery was colder and quieter and infinitely better. Beyond a railing of worn brass, the world fell away into 4 kilometers of indigo air, and Halcyon's lower rings glittered below them like a city that had decided to float rather than deal with the ground. The borrowed planet hung enormous on the horizon, copper-banded, its storms turning slow as thought. Theodore had seen it 10,000 times. Standing next to her, he felt like he was seeing it on loan. Better, Nova said, breathing out. Some tension he hadn't fully registered left her shoulders. Rooms full of frightened people make my ears ring. Literally, the Velari built these for reading a crowd's mood. She tapped one elegant point. Tonight the crowd's mood was please let the alien stand somewhere else. It's a very loud feeling. That's horrible. It's useful. I knew you were coming before you moved. Your mood was the only one in the room that wasn't afraid. She paused. It was mostly curiosity, and a small amount of those rumors are obviously idiotic, which I appreciated. You can hear that? Not words. Weather. She leaned on the brass rail beside him. You feel like a clear afternoon. It's restful. Most people feel like traffic. Theodore decided that was the nicest thing anyone had said to him in years, and that he would be thinking about it at inconvenient moments for the rest of his life. So what's the thing? The ominous one. We've achieved a balcony. The conditions are met. She was quiet for a while, watching the copper storms turn. When the Valarari settlement ships came through this region, generations back, they weren't colonists. They were cartographers. They mapped things other species couldn't. Not stars, but the spaces between intentions. The shape of what's coming before it arrives. She glanced at him. It thinned out over the bloodline. My grandmother could read a season ahead. My mother a week. I get flashes. Minutes, usually. Sometimes an hour, if it's something the universe really means. You can see the future. I can see a future. The likeliest one. It's less impressive than it sounds, and considerably more annoying. I knew you'd order the synthetic wine and regret it, for instance. I knew that man would bet 3 credits and lose them. Theodore absorbed this. And the slow-motion hand amputation? Wishful thinking on the crowd's part. I can't see that because it isn't going to happen. A flicker of the old dryness. Your hand is depressingly safe. He laughed, but it tapered, because she wasn't laughing with him now. She'd gone still, her gaze fixed on something past the storms, past the rings, somewhere the present didn't reach. That's not the ominous part, he guessed. No? Nova turned to face him fully, and for the first time all night she looked genuinely afraid. Not of the crowd, not of the rumors, but of him, or of what she was about to hand him. I keep getting a flash. The same one for 3 nights running, which has never happened to me before. It's always different futures. This one won't change. She drew a breath. It's this colony, Halcyon. Something's wrong with it, under it, in the part that keeps it in the sky. And in the flash, the man arguing with the valve when it happens is you. The night went very cold and very large around them. Theodore looked at her, then down through 4 kilometers of nothing, then back. When you say when it happens, soon. Days, I don't know exactly. The blurry ones are the close ones, which is the universe's idea of a joke. Her voice steadied, the fear hardening into something he'd later recognize as courage. I almost didn't tell you. Telling people what's coming has never once made them like me more. But your weather changed when I tried to stay silent, and I found I didn't want to lie to a clear afternoon. For a long moment Theodore said nothing, which Nova clearly took as the beginning of the end. He watched her brace for it, the polite retreat, the suddenly remembered appointment, the careful backing away that every other person had performed the instant she told them the truth. Instead he said, "Which valve?" She blinked. "What?" "In the flash. The one I'm arguing with when it happens. Was it the coolant regulator on the eastern ring or the big ugly pressure manifold under the core? Because those are very different conversations and I'd like to know which machine is about to ruin my evening." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I have history with the manifold. If it's the manifold, I'm not even surprised." Nova stared at him as though he'd grown a second head, which given her abilities she'd presumably have seen coming. "You believe me. You called my mood a clear afternoon and correctly predicted the wine. Frankly, the future stuff is the least unbelievable thing you've done tonight." He turned to lean his back against the rail, facing her, the copper planet glowing behind his shoulder. "Also, and I want to be clear about this, I've spent 11 years telling the maintenance board that the substructure dampeners are held together with optimism and spare wire, and they keep telling me the readings are within tolerance. So a beautiful woman appearing to confirm that everything is in fact about to fall apart is the most validated I've felt in my entire career." A sound escaped Nova that she seemed to immediately regret, a startled, undignified laugh, bright in the cold air. She pressed her fingers to her mouth as if to catch it and put it back. "That is not the reaction I prepared for." "What did you prepare for?" "Screaming, accusations. One man once told me I'd caused the thing I warned him about by saying it out loud, as though I were the weather and not the forecast." She shook her head slowly. "You're treating it like a work order, because it is one." He said it gently. "Nova, you didn't hand me a curse. You handed me a maintenance ticket with a deadline. That's the single most useful thing anyone's done for me in years. Everyone in that hall is busy choosing the prettiest face to be lonely next to. You walked onto a balcony and tried to save 8,000 people, including, inconveniently, me." She looked at him and the fear in her face was being slowly, visibly evicted by something she didn't have a name for. The night wind moved her hair. The pointed ears caught the planet light. "You're an extremely strange man," she said. "I negotiate with valves for a living. The strangeness is load-bearing." They stood with that for a while, the party murmuring far behind them, the storms turning far below. And then, because the silence had grown warm rather than heavy, Theodore did the thing he did with every frightening problem. He started taking it apart. "Tell me what you see. Everything, the light, the sounds, where I'm standing. The blurry ones are the close ones, you said, so let's unblur it together. You've got minutes of warning. I've got 11 years of knowing this colony's plumbing better than its own designers. Separately, we're 2 anxious people on a balcony, Together we might actually be a maintenance crew. Nova went quiet, and her eyes did the thing again, sliding sideways out of the present, fixing on a point only she could reach. Red light, she murmured. Emergency strip lighting. A low sound, building. You're shouting numbers at someone, pressure numbers. There's a smell like hot metal and ozone, and you keep saying a word, a name maybe. Margaret. Theodore went still. Margaret is the manifold. You named it. She's been threatening to kill me for a decade. It felt rude not to. But he was already somewhere else. The engineer in him fully awake now, sorting the flash into a diagram. Ozone means an arc fault in the primary. Pressure numbers mean Margaret's losing containment. If I'm shouting them, the readouts are still live, which means we'd have time. The future you saw isn't the disaster, Nova. It's the warning. It's me catching it. He looked at her, and something fierce and grateful kindled behind his eyes. You didn't show me how we die, he said. You showed me where to stand. They did not go back to the choosing. There seemed very little point. Whatever the ceremony had been offering, the balcony had already outbid it. Instead, Theodore led her down through the temple's working bones, the corridors no guest ever saw, where the obsidian glamour gave way to honest gray bulkhead and the hum of machinery doing the unglamorous labor of keeping a city aloft. Nova followed without complaint, stepping over conduit, ducking under a pipe that hissed companionably as they passed. This is where you spend your evenings, she observed. Home sweet home. Margaret's 2 levels down. I thought given that she's planning to murder us all on a schedule, you should meet her properly. You're introducing me to your manifold. It felt important. She's the other woman who's tried to ruin my life this month. He glanced back. You're handling the imminent catastrophe part of this date remarkably well, by the way. It's not the worst date I've been on. There was a man on Kasara Station who took me to a zero-gravity poetry recital and then proposed during the intermission. Nova ducked another pipe. At least your impending disaster has structural integrity as a theme. It's relatable. They reached the core gallery, and Margaret revealed herself, an enormous pressure manifold the size of a small house, ringed in valves and gauges and the patient red glow of status lights, breathing with the slow mechanical wheeze of something very old and very tired. Theodore approached her the way one approaches a sleeping animal. He laid a hand on her flank, read a gauge, and his easy humor drained out of his face by degrees. "Oh, Margaret," he said quietly, "what have they been letting you do to yourself? What is it?" The dampener fluid's running thin. The board's been topping her off with a cheaper synthetic to save credits, and it's separating under pressure. See this? He pointed to a gauge where a needle trembled in a band marked, with bureaucratic optimism, "Monitor." That's not a slow leak. That's a clock. Your minutes of warning, I think this is what you're seeing. When the fluid separates far enough, the primary arcs and Margaret stops being able to hold the eastern ring in the sky. Nova came to stand beside him, looking at the trembling needle as though meeting an old acquaintance in an unexpected place. That's it. That's the flash. The red light is that light. She pointed. It changes. It goes from red to white just before. White means total containment failure. Theodore's jaw tightened. How long in the flash between the white light and the rest of it? Seconds. Not many. Then we don't let it go white. He was already moving, pulling a worn tool roll from a locker, his hands steady in the way hands get, when the alternative is unthinkable. I can flush the bad fluid and re-primer with the real stuff. There's a reserve drum. There's always a reserve drum. They just pretend there isn't so they don't have to fill it. It's a 2-person job, one to hold the bypass open, one to run the flush. He looked up at her. I came down here planning to do it alone in a few days and probably die proving I was right. And now there are 2 of us, and we're early. You're saying I changed it. Something lit in Nova's face, fragile and enormous. The future, the one that wouldn't change for 3 nights. It's changing now. You changed it the second you told me. That's the part nobody ever let you see, isn't it? You only ever got to watch people walk into the thing you warned them about. You never got to stand next to one while he took the warning apart. He held out a wrench. Hold the bypass. When I say now, you turn this until it stops, and then you turn it a little more because it always lies about being stopped. She took the wrench. Their hands met around the cold steel and neither let go quite as fast as the task required. For the record, Nova said, this is also not the worst date I've been on. High praise. Kasara Station set a low bar. He rhymed nebula with fabula. I still hear it in nightmares. She set her jaw, fitted the wrench to the bypass, and braced. Tell me when. Above them faintly the party glittered on, 8,000 people choosing partners, sipping terrible wine, utterly unaware that their continued existence currently depended on a tired engineer, a wrench, and the galaxy's most mysterious woman who had walked into a maintenance bay because for once, someone had asked her to stay. Margaret's red light trembled. Theodore's hands found the flush valve. Now, he said. Nova turned the wrench until it stopped, And then, because he'd told her it lied, a little more, it gave a reluctant final quarter turn and sealed. Good, Theodore breathed. Hold it exactly there. If it slips, Margaret gets a vote, and Margaret votes for chaos. The flush valve groaned open under his hands. Somewhere in the manifold's vast iron gut, fluid began to move, the thin, separated, cost-cutting sludge draining out, the real dampener fluid waiting in a reserve drum that the maintenance board had sworn up and down did not exist. It existed. It always existed. Theodore had stopped being surprised by institutional dishonesty around the same time he'd started talking to valves. For 90 seconds, the only sounds were the gurgle of draining fluid, the manifold's tired wheeze, and Nova's steady breathing as she held the bypass against a pressure that wanted very badly to win. "Talk to me," she said through her teeth. "The weather in here just got extremely loud and it's all coming from you." "Sorry, engineer brain, it gets noisy." He watched a gauge climb, willing it higher. "Talk to you about what?" "Anything. Distract me before my arms file a complaint." "Right. Fun fact about Margaret, she's older than the colony's charter. They built Halcyon around her because moving her was too expensive. Everyone up there sipping wine is alive tonight because of a manifold so stubborn they had to design a city to accommodate her feelings." The needle crossed into green. His heart climbed with it. "I've always liked that about her. She refused to be moved, so the whole world bent instead." "Sounds like someone I'm holding a wrench for." "I was going to say it sounded like you, but I didn't want to be obvious." The reserve fluid hit the primary. The manifold shuddered, coughed, and then miraculously, beautifully settled into a deeper, healthier hum than Theodore had heard from her in years. The trembling red light steadied. It did not go white. It would not go white. He stared at it, and something in his chest that had been clenched for 11 years quietly let go. "There," he said, voice rough. "There she is. Hello, old girl." Nova eased off the wrench by careful degrees, ready to fight it back. It held. The future, the unchangeable one, the flash that had haunted her for 3 nights, simply dissolved, the way a forecast dissolves when the storm turns out to sea. She let go of the wrench entirely, and looked at her empty hands as though she'd never seen them do something that mattered before. "It's gone," she said softly. "The flash. I can't find it anymore. There's just the next likeliest future now, and it's so boring. You file a report. The board pretends they knew. Someone reimburses you for the fluid in 11 to 14 business days. That last part's pure fantasy. You've lost your gift." But he was grinning, and so, helplessly, was she. Theodore wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her. Really looked, in the honest gray light of a maintenance bay, where there were no candles to lend her mystery and no rumors to do her talking. Just a woman with pointed ears who read weather instead of words, who had spent her whole life watching people flee the truth she offered, and who had handed him one anyway because his mood reminded her of an afternoon she'd wanted to sit in. "Can I tell you something," he said, "that you probably already saw coming? My range is minutes, and only for disasters. You'll have to actually say it. That's the trouble with you being early to everything. Just once I'd like to surprise you." He set down the rag. Every man up there chose the safest, beautiful thing in the room. "I came down 4 levels into the dark with the woman the entire colony was too frightened to stand beside, and we saved all of them, and not one of them will ever know your name. And I find I don't want to fix that by telling them. I want to fix it by being the one person who does know it. For a long time. If you'll let me." Nova was quiet. Not the guarded quiet of the balcony, a different one. The kind that comes when someone has spent a lifetime braced for the door to close, and is only now learning the latch was never locked. "Your weather just changed," she said unsteadily. "It went warm. The whole room's gone warm." "That's not the room." "I know." She crossed the small distance between them, stepping over the conduit, ducking nothing this time because there was nothing left between them to duck. For the record, the Valari skin, the part one didn't inherit. It ran red when they were afraid. She took his hand, the one the entire colony had promised would fall off. Or in love. They were never able to hide either. "Lucky for you, you stayed boringly ordinary." "Lucky for me," she agreed. "I found someone who calls the truth a work order and the future a thing he can stand beside instead of run from." Above them the party glittered on, oblivious, and Margaret hummed her deep, contented hum, holding 8,000 strangers in the sky. And in the gray and honest light below, the engineer who talked to machines and the woman who read the weather of the heart stood with their hands joined, having chosen out of an entire dazzling galaxy, the one person no one else had been brave enough to see. The red light glowed steady, and it never once turned white. Yes, friends, we've come to the end of Theodore and Nova's story. Don't forget to like the story, leave your thoughts about it in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next sci-fi traveler story. See you in our next adventure. Take care.